Hello everybody, BeMetalways here. Hope everyone is doing well. This is the last video of 2020. I'm gonna be counting down my top 20 best metal albums of 2020 by myself, of course. You know, 2020 was obviously a crappy of a year in many ways, but also in other ways was still a very good year for metal and album releases. I easily reviewed more than 80 albums. I narrowed to 77 that I liked, and then I ranked my top 50. And today I'm just gonna give you the top 20 because I don't want this video to be too long, but I'll make sure you get the full list as well. But I do want to mention some honorable entries between the number 21 and 50. I must say that I really liked some songs of the Heaven Shall Burn album, but the album is way too long, and then it's difficult to rank it as an overall piece of art to rank it so high because there are too many songs and some of them are not that great. I think Primal Fear released one very good album in the power metal scene, you know, doing what they do best. I really like the Striper album. You know, it's different. It's power metal-ish. The lyrics are a bit corny, but I think it's still a very good album. I also want to mention that I did dug Ozzy Osbourne, not entirely. That's why it's only a mention. But there are some good songs there, some songs not so good. The production's a bit weird, but it is on my list. Two albums that were very high in many lists, Code Orange and Deftones, are also in my honorable mentions, but not that high for me personally. Another shout out for Enslaved that I see very high in some lists. For me, it was about number 30. I think there was a couple of songs there that didn't work and damaged the overall rank of the album. One album that I haven't seen in any list is British Lion by Steve Harris band. And I think The Burning, very early in the year, actually, it was a good album. I dug it. But I didn't get any attention since. And then, of course, AC/DC didn't make my top 20, but it's quite high on my list as well. I mean, it's a big comeback. It's what you would expect for them. They delivered what we want from them, which is a cool album for rock and roll. The other one that almost made it was Sepultura with Quadra. I really liked this album when it came out. It was my top album of the year for a big portion of the year. But then, yeah, when I re-listened to it, in comparison to the other ones that made the list, it dropped quite a few spots, finishing in the number 21. So just didn't make it, but it's still a very good album. Now, I must say that all these honorable mentions and everything that is in my top 50 list, they are all good albums, some a little bit better than others, and then when you get to the top 2010, then they become very good albums. But these are all very decent accomplishments and things that I really enjoyed. All right, so without further ado, let's start counting down from number 20. Number 20 is Psychopath Waltz with the God-Shaped Void. I saw this one popping up in some lists, which I'm very happy for. To hear, I mean, after 25 years, they return with this album, and it's a very well written, recorded, top-notch performances, a very good progressive rock album. It is a grower. It requires some attention to capture all the details and getting into it, but once you do it, it is a very worthy album for any proggy metal fan. So really recommend Psychopath Waltz as number 20. We continue in the prog world with number 19, Fate's Warning, Long Day, Good Night. This is one of my all-time favorite bands. I love the discography, I love their albums, and maybe that's why I'm a bit more picky with them, because I expect a lot. This is a good album. I like it a lot, but it's a bit too long, and there's a couple of songs that did not work for me. So when you put it all together, it loses some steam because of the length and a couple of fillers, in my opinion. But still, love the band. Good album. Fate's Warning, number 19. Number 18, it's still in the prog area. This is Intern Out with Fluid Existential Inversions. I think this album requires some time to fully digest it, but after you do it and you take some time with it, you start seeing the building in it, and then you will start appreciating it. I suspect that I didn't see this in many lists because of this factor. It takes time to get to it, and that's a shame, because once you get into it, this is one of the best prog albums of the year for sure. Very nice. Intern Out, Fluid Existential Inversions. It's modern, it's proggy, it has some jazz influences, very good musicianship, so really recommended as well. So we jump to number 17 with the Dark Forest, Oak, Ash and Thorn. This is a curved ball in this list, and I hope will help some people to get to know this band, because I haven't seen this album in any list so far. While not completely original, the sound created by Dark Forest is magical and adventurous. It's a well-crafted and executed album that created this soaring epic melodies with, just enough power to avoid going into cheesy territory. But it all comes down to impeccable songwriting, which makes all the difference. So certainly one of the best traditional / power metal album of the year. So we go now to number 16. This is a different beast completely. We're talking about an album that is the second part from the first part, and this is The Ocean with Phanerozoic Part 2. So this is a more experimental, more eclectic release that impressed me from the get-go. The first 2 tracks are absolutely amazing, 2 of the best songs of the year, and they are epic, full of changes. They explore several musical influences, and that's what this band does. The Ocean continues to push heavy music forward. They embrace heaviness, but they also include a lot of mood, and it's all merged into one beautiful and heavy album. Love it. All right, so we are already at number 15. This is also a very proggy album, Blackcrown, Initiate with Violent Portraits of Doomscape. This album, as it is not a big departure from the previous record, but still has its own character. I haven't seen that many praises for this album, but I believe it's and maybe that's because it has a greater appeal to prog fans than death metal fans. So they might be switching a little bit their target audience there, their fan base, because there's a lot of clean vocals, atmospheric passage, melodic passages, and less heaviness than the early albums. But for me, that works very well, and Violent Portraits of Doomscape is one of the best prog albums of 2020. Number 14, Catatonia, City Burials. This is one that, while Sepultura fell down my list, Catatonia grew very fast in the last few weeks. I listened, I liked it, then I put it on the side and I came back to it this later weeks of the year, and then I realized that I missed a little bit, so I increased my rating compared to what I originally gave to this album. It builds on their foundation, but also added some interesting elements leading to some great songs such as Behind the Blood, Heart Set to Divide, and Untrodden. City Burials is not perfect, as I mentioned, and that's why it took me some time to get into it, but still a very good album with moments of high-level songwriting and this melancholic catchiness that really works well in a year like 2020. The production and delivery are excellent. It sounds very beautiful. A suitable soundtrack for 2020. Now we jump to another album that has been released very recently, and it's a supergroup, Killer Be Killed with Reluctant Hero. You know, listen to this album made me, you know, not only go back to their debut album, but also really wanted to listen more to Dillinger Escape Plan, Mastodon, and early Sepultura, because this, you know, the supergroup with the members of those three bands, they really combine their best of those bands into one, and I love it for that. In addition to this, there's the new drummer that is kicking ass behind the kits. It's very, very nice album. It follows the same direction of the debut, but the quality it's even above. So a very good album. And if you like those guys in their bands, or if you like the debut album, this is guaranteed fun. Number 12, Anonathrak, or whatever you say it, with the album Endarkment, which is one of the most interesting album covers of the year, with this big head with dicks out of the eyes. It's really disturbing, as it is the album. I mean, those guys, it's a duo that released an album a couple of years ago that I really, really dug, and now they came back with something even better, maybe, or at least at par with the previous records. And there's no way to really label this band. It's death metal, it's grindcore, it's melodic death metal, it's black metal. There are touches of industrial, and also even operatic vocals at times, that it's even close to power metal at moments. So I'm not sure how they make this work, but it does, and I love it. So really one of the best extreme metal albums of 2020, which leads me to a very close contender in this extreme metal scene with number 11, Napalm Death, Throes of Joy in the Jaws of Defeatism. While brutal and furious, Napalm Death was able to explore other forms of extremity in music and created a very diverse metal album without losing their identity. For example, there are songs here that have a very strong groove, some almost like a black and roll song, and other songs like Amoral that it's catchy punk rock. You know, the furious blast beats are still very much present in most tracks, but the exploration of other influences makes this album more fun and not repetitive, and to me, one of the best extreme metal albums of the year as well. Which brings us to the top 10. Yeah. Top 10. Number 10 is actually one of the latest, the latest album that I reviewed in the channel, is Valenplas with the Ghost Experiment Illumination. So this one is very fresh in my mind because it has just been released at the beginning of December. It's one of my favorite power prog metal bands, and they delivered again. You know, overall I was surprised because this is their best record in like more than 10 years, and it proves again that they are an underrated band, continue their own unique path, and they deserve more credit for it. This is another glorious work that brings up their roots and influences while moving the band forward. It's a must-have for any prog metal fans, especially if you were a fan of the early albums and lost contact with them. Please come back, because this album really brings back that early feel from the first albums. And we go to number 9, something completely different. This is Mr. Bungo with the Raging Wrath of the Easter Bunny. This is a re-record of the demo that those guys did when they were kids. It's unbelievable how good this is after all these years, and with the production and the you know, featuring Scott Young from Anthrax and the drummer Dave Lombardo. This is just amazing, and of course Mike Patton on vocals. The riffs and the drumming on this album are just great. I also love how they combine groove with insanely fast-paced tempo. You know, it's modern because of the recording, but with this thrash 80s vibe, because the songs were written many years ago. The guitar tones are great. Mike Patton singing is very unique and a great from start to finish. You know, this album is one of the best thrash metal albums of the year and a fantastic listening experience. So really highly recommended. Which, yeah, brings us to number 8, Armored Saint with Punch in the Sky. You know, Punch in the Sky is one of the best metal albums of the year for sure. That's why it's number 8. It has a great production, the sound is great, and the performances and music writing just jaw-dropping. If you listen to this, it's a breath of fresh air from a very mature band. It will make you, literally raise your fists and punch in the sky. I think we need to celebrate that after all these years, those guys are still delivering the goods, and a very underrated band, in my opinion. They should be much bigger and deserve this spot of number 8 on my list. So now we go to something completely different. We go to number 7, Paradise Lost, Obsidian. I think this album came in the middle of the pandemic, first wave, if I'm not mistaken. And if he was a good fit to that moment, what I like about Obsidian is the diversity, that has the potential to please different segments of the band's fan base, and I think that's why I've seen this album ranking very high in very diverse publications. It's trademark Paradise Lost is full of melancholy and bittersweetness, which, as I mentioned, fits well with the 2020. But it also keeps the heavy elements from the last 2 albums, which were very heavy, if you remember that. But they bring a lot of the Sister of Mercy influence to the foreground. And while not a radical departure in sound, Obsidian has just enough experimentation to keep those veterans relevant in 2020, while staying truthful to their roots. Number 6, also on the darker side of things, we have Sorcerer with Lamenting of the Innocent. This is all the elements you would expect from an epic doom album. Big epic choruses, catchy melodies, heavy riff, strong vocal performances, and great musicianship. If you put aside the fact that nothing really new about it, is very similar to Candlemas, if you put that aside, you will give yourself a treat, because if you like epic doom, this is the best epic doom album of 2020. Now we are already at the top 5 albums, and number 5 is another thrash album. It's Testament with Titans of Creation. They did it again. This is, to my recollection, the 4th excellent album in a row, and shows actually no signs of them, those veterans, to be getting tired of making great music. I mean, in a ways, this is a super group with the incredible lineup that they have it, and they're great songwriters as well, and make it everything very impressive. They are able to do this and this 4th album in a row, and still they are expanding their sound without losing their identity and their thrash metal. So there's a little bit of hints of different things being used here that make the album interesting. It is a bit long, but still, this is a mandatory album for any thrash metal fan. Number 4, we go to Trivium, What the Dead Men Say. This is an album that I loved from the beginning. It was hovering my top 3 of the year during most of the year. This is their 9th studio album, and they put together a masterpiece of modern metal, in my opinion. What this album does is that it transcends genres and perfectly combines the different sounds that the band has explored over the last 20 years. It's their heaviest album they've made in more than a decade or so, but it's also very melodic, progressive, and diverse. In many ways, I believe Trivium found their sound finally. There are no formulas here, no preconceptions, just 4 guys making the music they love, and I hope they will continue this path, because this is a fantastic modern metal album. So there you go, number 4, Trivium. We go into something very progressive again. This is number 3. This is Haken with Virus. The best concept album of the year. The band has said that the title was actually a coincidence and nothing to do with the coronavirus crisis. But anyways, it is calling the attention, of course, when you have this title being released in 2020. But it is also a continuation of the previous record, and musically, the instrumental bridges on this album and each musician proficiency is jaw-dropping. It's this band, I love it because they are less self-indulgent than Dream Theater, but still quite similar at times. And of course, I do like Dream Theater as well. And they have developed their own signature sound by now and are, with no doubt, one of the best prog metal bands in activity today. So they deserve to be number 3 in my list with this fantastic Virus album. Number 2, yes, this is maybe a love or hate album because I saw people that hate it, but I did see highly ranked in some, at least European lists, and it's Nightwish with Human to Nature. This is symphonic metal with female vocals. And yeah, this genre can be a cliche and by far not my favorite metal genre, so it's quite impressive that it made my number 2. But, Nightwish with the current lineup has reached a complete new level of music writing. The arrangements are amazing, the musicianship, and of course the delivery, especially from Floor on vocals. This is an amazing record for any metal fan, actually, and could be old Nightwish fans, new ones. There's a bit of everything in Human to Nature, and it could have been my album of the year, but yeah, I ended up putting number 2, which of course finishes off by bringing number 1, which Spirit Adrift with Enlightened in Eternity. I just loved this album. I saw in some lists not as high as I would expected. Some reviews were not that good, but you know what? I loved it. It touched me. I saw this discussion many times. Music's not a competition. It's very personal. You can't argue with what you like, what touches your mind, what touches your heart, what makes you bring your emotions. And I think this album worked for me from the beginning. It's a great album. I got hooked from the beginning and actually only grew on me since then. It was high on my list, but it continues to get up and up. And I love the songwriting, how they do this homage to traditional heavy metal combined with doom influences, but all done through modern lenses. It's additionally, the music writing is great, so is the sound, especially the guitar riffs, the solos, the melodies. I was surprised that, as I mentioned, that some reviews were not as good as mine, but it is a departure from their previous records. Maybe that's what put off some people, but to me, this works. And I look at this album in comparison to others of 2020. In a year like this, a well-written, produced, traditional heavy metal album that make your fist pumps and sing along is definitely fitting well in my agenda, and it is my 2020 album of the year, Spirit Adrift, Enlightened in Eternity. So there you have it. That's a very long video because we went to all the 20 albums, and I hope you like it. Thanks for 2020 if you dialed, and thanks for 2020 if you have joined me, and I hope to have you listen to this channel in 2021. Happy New Year and BeMetalways!